People sometimes ask me what my favorite deck or my favorite card in Hearthstone is, but I personally think a better question is what my least favorite deck is. And the answer to that is Old School Paladin, also known as Pirate Warrior. A year ago, that deck was in the exact spot that Paladin is in right now, having remained powerful at the turn of the Year of the Kraken to the Year of the Mammoth. Eventually, the deck died out when a core card, Fiery War Axe, was nerfed. And would you look at that, Blizzard has announced some balance changes are coming up in a few more weeks. It looks like our Paladin decks probably have their days numbered. Assuming Blizzard doesn't ignore the 3 top-tier decks of the meta, kinda like they've done before. It's worth noting that the War Axe nerf came last September, and the patch's nerf last February, so Blizzard gets a pat on the back for not taking quite that long this time. Greetings and welcome to Hearthstone Theory, the favorite of my 3 shows. Though custom card coverage usually has a higher like-dislike ratio, so maybe I'm a weirdo for holding this show to such high esteem. Before we get to today's lesson, I want to share with you details of my method of thinking, the theory behind Hearthstone Theory, if you will. Even the newest of Hearthstone players can recognize that certain cards are better than others, but that all of them fall within a certain range of power. I call the study of balancing these cards power theory, or sometimes balance theory, and it's basically the first concept that you need to understand if you want to be a successful card analyst. Most aspects of power theory are pretty self-evident. 1/1 in stats is worth 1 mana, 1 mana is worth 1 card in hand, 1 card in hand is worth 1 damage, and 1 damage is worth 1/1 in stats. Of course, there are always exceptions and complications, but power theory does a good job of creating a baseline from which to judge a card. In my other videos, this is where the power stat comes from on the graphs that I sometimes use. However, while revising and judging these cards, I always drew a blank when it came to rating weapons, and who can blame me? Weapons are naturally quite complicated, but they are few enough in number that players can simply understand that some of them are good and some of them are bad without critical thought. King's Defender is bad, but Eaglehorn Bow is good. Light's Justice is bad, but Candleshot is good. Candleshot is good, but Gladiator's Longbow is bad. Gladiator's Longbow is bad, but Gorehowl and Arcanite Reaper are good. Most Hearthstone players know this hierarchy, but few know why this is the case. So today, I will be like Isaac Newton being hit with an apple, and I will examine these weapons that often clobber me in the face. We'll start off with power theory, and then move on to some more complicated examples that require a little bit more insight and ingenuity. Hopefully, we will all become better at judging and examining weapon cards at the end of this analysis. As always, if you disagree with or don't understand an aspect of what I say, be sure to leave a comment. I really enjoy seeing intellectual audience members give their side of the story in the comments, and I thankfully have a remarkable lack of trolls lurking there. You guys are the best, and I appreciate the additional content that you provide. As for the trolls, keep not existing, please. As a final note before we start, I'm going to avoid talking about the weapons I call staff weapons, which are more like permanent effects rather than traditional weapons. I talk more about these in some of my older videos, so click the annotation if you want to hear my take on those cards. My channel was like 1 month old when those videos came out, so be prepared for lower quality content if you go there. Anyways, let's begin. A key aspect of power theory is that you need to do your best to compare cards to a certain baseline. Each card of a certain type is compared to other similar cards. Minions are compared to Chillwind Yeti, damage spells to Fireball or Flame Strike, and so on and so forth. Weapons are their own category of card that gives the hero the weapon's attack a number of times equal to the weapon's durability. For a baseline, we'll use Fiery War Axe, a weapon that used to cost 2 mana but now costs 3. Considering that old axe was used in every single warrior deck, and new axe is comparable to other weapons of a similar mana cost, just, worse, using this card as a baseline allows us to see both what it's definitely worth, 2 mana, and what it isn't worth, 3 mana. So we have our base examples. How do we rate them in comparison to minions and other effects? This is where we can look at equivalent cases where weapons act similar to other cards. However, things become complicated with weapons. Some might look to Fiery War Axe as the equivalent of 2 Dark Bombs, but Dark Bombs don't do damage to your hero's face. You can spend time examining that rabbit hole, but I have a different proposal. Let's step back. Now hear me out on this. Your hero can be viewed as a 0/30 minion that causes you to lose if you let it be destroyed. This hero minion just needs a caveat to be immune to cards like Assassinate, though notably not immune to cards like Sacrificial Pact. It's a weird concept, but one that would be tedious to explain, so let's accept this model of looking at the game and move on. Under this model, new parallels can be drawn between weapons and other cards. To start with, Blessing of Might gives 3 attack, much like Fiery War Axe does. The difference is that Blessing of Might is permanent and tied to a less permanent minion. Rockbiter weapon is another comparison, being the same as a 3-1 weapon, but also having the flexibility to be cast on any minion. Heroic Strike likewise acts in a similar manner to a weapon, being like unto a 4-1 weapon, with the ability to synergize with other weapons. Now we have a much clearer idea of how we can examine Fiery War Axe. It's the same as granting attack for one turn, a number of times equal to the durability. Comparing and contrasting with Blessing of Might, both cards can be used to attack immediately, similar to Charge, and while Fiery War Axe isn't permanent, Blessing of Might requires a minion on the field, which can also be slain. Putting all this together, Fiery War Axe ends up looking equivalent to 2 Blessings of Might, being worth slightly more in the best case, and in other matchups being worth a bit less. Considering Blessing of Might's cost of 2, 1 mana and 1 card, is worth half of Fiery War Axe's cost of 4, 3 mana and 1 card, and that both of these cards are slightly subpar anyways, and you have a reasonable formula for this circumstance. So Fiery War Axe is worth 6 attack, or 3 attack 2 times. The flexibility of choosing when to attack, and in using your health instead of a minion's, evens out in regards to what is risked with the minion. Are you satisfied? Is the answer of worth equals attack times durability adequate for you? Because, well, there are some problems with it. Take notably Assassin's Blade. By the same formula, this card is worth 12 attack, and yet it is a subpar weapon despite being in a class with lots of weapon synergies. Or perhaps you looked at Twig of the World Tree and seen how valuable that card can be, supplying 6 free mana. Why aren't these cards top tier? And this is where power theory begins to fall apart, specifically in regards to delayed effects. In addition to flexibility limits that higher cost cards have, there is a weakness to having a weapon that has a lot of durability. The weakness is simple: you're not guaranteed to get all of the benefit of the weapon. This weakness exists because of 2 reasons: tempo and weapon removal effects. To start with, tempo can win any game where the opponent doesn't spend resources to counter it. A high durability weapon, meanwhile, doesn't have much immediate impact on the game, gaining value over time. In a tempo matchup, it is rare to be able to afford the resources to play a high durability weapon without tempo taking you down. This is the main reason Twig of the World Tree doesn't work. 4 mana right now is worth a lot more than 10 mana in the future. What good is that 10 mana if you die on turn 5? Weapon removal from effects like Acidic Swamp Ooze is much more self-evident. The more durability remains on a weapon when it's destroyed, the less worth that weapon gave you. Losing a 1 durability Fiery War Axe is fine. Losing your Silver Sword, not so much. So once again, low durability weapons win out, with 2 durability weapons easily being the most popular. So let's say you want to make more expensive weapons, like some of the weapons in Kobolds and Catacombs. Since high durability doesn't work, the solution is to make weapons with high attack, right? Wrong. High attack can get dangerous quickly because weapons can go to face. An unchecked Arcanite Reaper, which by our formula is notably undervalued, can do 10 damage to the opponent, which is the same total effect as a Pyroblast. Basically, this attack stat can be translated directly into damage, much the same way that charge minions or the Fireball spell can be. Unlike tempo, which grows weaker as mana increases, aggro effects grow stronger, which is why Pyroblast is used more often than Tyrantus. High attack weapons are the same way, providing large amounts of damage and the potential to do even more afterwards. This is why, with the release of Kobolds and Catacombs, where every class got a legendary weapon, Blizzard made the highest cost weapons have special effects rather than high stats. Finding a happy medium with 3 durability, they launched these weapons to remarkable mediocrity. The effects chosen for these weapons were either too random, or they provided tempo, which isn't going to help if your opponent is able to defeat you. Woecleaver's presence in a recruit deck proved to be too slow to adequately stand up to tempo-focused decks, while the Gloom Spear was just weird, I don't know. But having a weapon with a special ability and 2 durability gets old fast, and if we want it to remain balanced, the effect can't be too weak or too impressive. So, high mana weapons have been relatively shortcoming, right? Well, not exactly. For a start, let's talk about one of the greater success stories of all weapon cards, Gorehowl. While not seen much today, Gorehowl was a powerhouse and control warrior after the Grand Tournament, using a boosted hero power and other defensive cards to great effect. This is because, while it is a long-lasting weapon, it uses most of its ability in the first few swings. In addition, its simple clause of losing durability if you go face left the option open for an aggressive strategy, but didn't allow it to become overwhelming like Arcanite Reaper does. Frankly, this card is the best weapon because it's just cool, good anti-tempo, covering the weakness of weapons while avoiding the power swing capabilities. Kingsbane is another example of success, providing users the means to put together a powerful weapon without leaving themselves exposed to the weapon being destroyed. Probably the biggest weaknesses of cards like Spectral Cutlass and Assassin's Blade, weapons that rogues are expected to buff, is that simple tech cards oppose them perfectly. Kingsbane is instead hindered by this effect, but not defeated by it, making the investment much stronger while leaving the deck's early game weakened, but not crippled. The same can be said for other weapon cards with Battle Cries or Death Rattles. They provide a suitable counter strategy for the removal tech cards that can undercut a weapon's value. Vinecleaver and Silver Sword are conversely other cards that have been strong by doubling down on the tempo swing, rather than by countering opposing tempo. Does this make them enablers of a tempo-based paladin meta where boards of minions can be boosted and buffed beyond belief? Maybe, but we can regardless look at these cards as stories of weapons gone right. So what's the point of addressing this? Well, it's first worth examining the rationale of how weapons can be too slow or too fast, depending on their cost and durability. Most Hearthstone cards are going to be balanced. The question then becomes, what cards will fit into this tempo-focused model of the game? The answer, well, the ones that can be used nice and early, the ones with low durability, the ones that provide clever mechanics, the ones that provide tempo, the ones that provide defense against tempo, and if Blizzard are crazy enough, the ones that deal a lot of damage. Some cards will run counter to these ideas, others will run with the ideas to a ridiculous extent. All I can hope is that I provided you with the tools to better understand and utilize these cards in the future, especially as more come out in future expansions.